separate topic. We're gonna jump into the actual episode. Let's have you introduce yourself.
Yes, so my name is Bront'e Singleton, but I am known as the Polyglot Fox on all of the interwebs, all the socials. And I call myself officially an introvert language coach. I've been like dabbling with different titles, but generally I'm just a language coach. And I really like helping language learners, specifically my introvert people, my perfectionist people, to learn and use the languages that they're learning. So, a lot of times, especially because language coaching is a fairly new concept, a lot of people immediately ask, well, what languages do you teach? And then I have to respond, I don't necessarily teach the languages, but it's more about the process, and that can help you regardless of what language you're learning. And so a lot of the people that I work with right now are learning some of the languages that I know and I'm learning, but they're also learning ones that I'm not, like Swedish and Icelandic and Finnish. Those are not on my list, but they are learning them and I'm helping them with that process. So I really just love helping language learners to figure out the best way for them to learn languages rather than trying to subscribe to a path that doesn't work, getting frustrated and hearing someone on the internet that told you frustration is a part of the process. You're gonna hate it, but it's
Yeah,
okay. It's like,
yeah,
no, you could actually have fun and do
yeah.
this and give yourself grace and all of these other things that I say all the time.
Mm.
So yeah, that's what I do. And then that means that I get to continue learning all the languages that I'm already learning and maintaining them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This we need to back up for a second. Just because I of course am totally there with you. I'm there on the ship of the future. Like, and this is the direction that not only we're going, but where we are right now. I do feel that it's a fairly new concept for a lot of people who aren't familiar. In terms of language being something you can do outside of a classroom. And I will say that living abroad definitely opened my eyes to all that, but also just traveling internationally and people being completely surprised to be bilingual from birth. It was like a fairly new concept for a lot of people. And I realized on this life journey that
Mhm.
sometimes we need to go back a few steps in order to make sure we're all here.
Yes,
um,
yes, yeah.
so let's talk a little bit about how you came to this conclusion yourself, right? Because I actually think that would help a lot in terms of showing people that it wasn't, I mean, you weren't like born and then like day two, you're like, all right, I'm going to help people, like coach
No,
them
not at
on their
all.
own paths. Yeah.
Not at
So,
all. It was actually something that someone else recommended to me.
okay. Yeah. So if we can go from the beginning to sort of how you personally made that shift, I think that would really help a lot of people understand that it's normal and yeah, totally okay to be frustrated, but also to realize that we were all under a certain type of education system,
Yes.
philosophy, and then what other options exist. If you could talk
Yeah.
about that.
Well, technically, my earliest exposure to language, I don't come from a bilingual family.
Mm,
Technically, and I'll like go into the technicality in a second, but my family all speaks English. Um, but I was exposed to it in my environment, in my
mm,
neighborhood, right? Lots
mm,
of languages and dialects and things like that. But my first sort of learning of another language wasn't until fifth or sixth grade. I had a teacher who, I think it was fifth grade, she decided on her own that it was really important for us to learn Spanish, especially being in a neighborhood where there are a lot of Spanish speakers.
mm.
And so she just took part of her schedule to teach us Spanish. She like
Wow.
edited whatever she was doing for the day. She was our social studies
Wow.
teacher and our homeroom
Yeah.
teacher and was like, okay, cutting social studies just a little short so we can have like a 15-minute Spanish lesson. And she made it really interactive and really engaging. I remember her tossing, she had this like blow up globe in the classroom and she would
Mm.
use that to toss around. So whoever caught it was the
Uh,
person who had to respond.
uh,
And one of the activities that she did all the time was like, repeat after me in Spanish or repeat after me in English. And she would say it. So she's like, repite después también en español. And then like, and like that
yeah.
alone would get us really excited in fifth grade.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we're gonna
Oh my
do it.
God. Yeah.
And she would just
Yeah.
say a single word like pencil or blue.
Yeah.
and we would have
Yeah.
to respond just building up that vocabulary. And
Wow.
I remember in that moment going, okay, languages are cool.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
like that was, I distinctly remember that being the start of my obsession with
Yeah.
languages. And,
Yeah.
I went through school, sixth grade through middle school, taking Spanish and recognizing that I was really good at passing tests. But every
Mm.
year I couldn't actually speak with my friends who, spoke Spanish.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And there was also this perfectionism in me because I didn't want to make mistakes while talking with them. I wanted to talk like they talked with each other and be understood. And I was like, if
Yeah.
I can't do that, I gotta wait. I gotta wait until I'm there. And
Yeah.
like there is some, I was gonna say like validity in it, but there is like good reasons to wait sometimes. Like as introverts, like
Mm.
if we really can't start, there are other ways to improve speaking, but I didn't know those other ways. Like I didn't know how
Mm.
to build all those other skills that impact our speaking,
Mm-hmm.
like pronunciation and like
Mm.
building a sentence. I didn't know that.
Mm.
I was like 12.
Yeah, exactly.
But there is also a place to sort of push yourself with people you trust.
Yeah.
And at that time I wish that like future me could go back and just say, but these are your friends.
Mm.
Like you can trust making mistakes in front of your friends. You do that already, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And being able to translate that sort of mistake making into language learning. I feel like
Mm.
every new thing that we do in our lives, we have to relearn how to mess up and
Yeah.
relearn how to not be great at it, which is
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
And I went through middle school Spanish and then all the way up to Spanish 4 in high school. And that was my junior year. And so I had an open slot in my schedule.
Mm.
And through middle school to high school, I was also learning Japanese and Korean because me and my
Mm.
friends were obsessed with K-pop and obsessed with
Mm.
anime. And so we were like, Inu, Neko, like we're
Yeah.
learning
Oh
words.
my God.
Annyeonghaseyo.
Yeah.
Like we felt so cool. And
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing for me and my friends was that we felt like every time we were learning a new word and diving into a new language, we were getting invited into a secret club. Like, oh
Mm.
my God, we can like talk with each other in class and the
Oh,
teacher's not gonna know what we're
yes.
saying. Like it just felt
Yes.
really nice to like have this language that we could use. Um, and that was also when like Pig Latin was really big
Oh
in school.
yeah.
And we're like, yeah, and the teachers will never know what you're like. Mostly it's just the teachers or like your parents or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And so when I got to high school in that last year, I was like, okay, let me look at the languages that are available and
Mm.
see, because I knew I wanted to continue doing languages. I think somewhere in that journey, I said I wanted to do 5 languages by 25 and 10 languages by
Mm.
30. I was like, I'm all in. Like, let's
Yeah.
do this. So that fourth year, I took Mandarin,
Wow.
and young high school me was like, I know it's not exactly Japanese, but it's close enough, in comparison to like Spanish or French, that I was like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna take Mandarin and see how
Mm.
that goes. It
Hmm.
was completely different because
Yeah.
tones were not a thing that I ever
Everything.
had to learn.
Yeah.
I was like, what is this? You
Yeah.
mean, I learned later when I was trying to practice with a friend that I tried to ask her, does she have a cat? And I ended up saying, do you have fur? And I was like, why? Why is this a problem that I have to
Yeah.
confront?
Yeah.
Like, this should be an issue. But no, it was like, it was giving me practice on how to make mistakes and laugh,
Mm. Yeah.
right? And rather than make mistakes and despair and hate myself and
Yeah.
like, it sometimes still comes up, but I have the like self-talk
Mm.
now that I repeat that
Mm.
helps me to like, okay, but this is funny, right? Tell somebody
Yeah.
else, have them laugh with you.
Yeah.
And then I got into
Absolutely.
college, and that was even more language. So I took
Mm.
Japanese for 3 years, and I would say that was my first experience of more traditional school because I'm in a class, I'm with other
Mm.
students, there's a teacher involved.
Hmm.
But the first experience where language teaching
Mm.
actually helps me to learn the language.
Mm.
And so, as someone who, wasn't born bilingual, but started in what is fifth grade age, like 9-ish,
Yeah.
And, so from 9 until college at 17, 18,
Mm.
it wasn't until then that I had my first experience of I can actually speak the language from the
Mm.
class. And I
Yeah.
immediately started to think about why.
Mm.
I'm always thinking about the whys and the
Mm.
hows, and I think that's what led me to coaching.
Mm.
So I was like, what made this class different? It's because they focused on two things that I think are really important: immersion as much as possible and using the
Mm.
language as much as possible. So my
Mm.
Japanese one class, we had to use every time we learned something new in Japanese, we had to use it in the class.
Mm.
Japanese two was half in Japanese, half in English.
Wow.
So we had to use the language more. By the time I got to Japanese three, that was an entirely Japanese class. There was
Yeah.
no English allowed in that classroom. If you
Yeah.
needed to use English, you had to ask for permission in Japanese. We were writing
Yeah.
essays in Japanese. We
Wow.
were having like different cultural experiences around New York
Mm.
because I'm from New York.
Mm.
And then my friends throughout those 3 years were so excited about the process
Mm.
that we did even more. Like we made a
Mm.
whole language and Japanese language and culture club so we could just watch shows and then have the school pay for like we did like
Yes.
rice ball events. So
Yeah.
like we could just make rice balls together and have like
Yeah.
fried shrimp and like we did it all and we would go to like the different cafes on campus talking in
Mm.
Japanese with each other, texting each
Mm.
other in Japanese. Like we lived it.
Yeah.
And so even to this day, when I don't use it as much, Japanese is one of the languages that I am more comfortable jumping back into
Yeah.
because I had so much exposure and practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized those were the two things that I don't think people emphasize enough as I like
Mm.
started to progress even more. That a lot
Mm-hmm.
of resources and um, polyglots and language experts online, they often talk about the study part.
Yeah.
Study the vocabulary, study the grammar, get your flashcards and do your daily
Mm.
flashcards and get your streak on Duolingo, or Lingo Dear, and or
Mm.
they say start from day one and do the thing you're trying to do with no practice, no information.
Yeah.
And either option is either neglecting some areas that are important or putting you in a position that you might not be ready for yet. And it's okay to not
Yeah.
be ready. And so I think like what I have learned and what got me into coaching was that you really have to do what worked best for you. But in order to do that, you need to know your options.
Mm.
And not it's hard to find your options when everyone is kind of regurgitating and saying the same things over and over again. They're all like repeating the same five strategies as the only way to learn a language. And anyone
Yeah.
that says anything else, they're like, you're wrong, and that doesn't work. Like
Yeah.
the amount of times I've had to fight about learning multiple languages at the same time. They're like, you can't
Yeah.
do it. I'm like, but I did.
Yeah.
And they're
And
like,
people
well,
do every day.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And then or the thing is, it's gonna take you too long.
Mm.
I'm not in a rush,
Yeah, I know.
you know? So like there's these beliefs that
Mm.
are involved in it. It's like you shouldn't do it because it's gonna take too long. Well, do you have a deadline?
Mm-hmm.
Because then yeah, maybe you might want to consider something else.
Yeah.
But most of us don't. Like we set up
Yeah.
deadlines. We sign up for JLPT test, but
Mm-hmm.
voluntarily.
Yeah.
We're setting that deadline for ourselves.
Yeah.
Um, and so I somewhere between college and then teaching. So I teach middle school and I've done elementary for a little bit.
Mm.
I joined a Discord group and we became really close friends in that group. And we would help each other. And I just became the like organization person. Like if they
Mm.
needed a plan or needed help figuring out resources, like they would ask me for that. Or like, could you help me set up like my Notion and like I need
Mm.
a worksheet for.
Mm.
And through those conversations, I remember one person, I was like, I want to do something. I'm thinking about business, but I don't know what to do. Like, I just feel called to have my own thing.
Yeah.
And she was like, help people with languages. She's
Mm.
like, look at this person here. And like, sent me a couple videos of people that she followed. And I was like, language coaching? I could do that?
Yeah.
Like I don't have to because I didn't really feel called to teach the languages.
Yeah.
I've done that with friends, but I feel like I could definitely recommend my favorite teachers and favorite resources, but I didn't want to be another person in the space.
Yeah.
teaching the languages. There's nothing wrong with that, but I was like, that's just not what I want to do. So
Yeah.
what else is there? I was like, translators, but I don't really want to be a
Mm.
translator, and an interpreter, but I don't. That sounds cool, but I
Yeah.
feel like I feel like I'd get frustrated or bored after a little bit. I'd be like, shiny object in
Mm.
this.
Yes.
um, so coaching is what I landed on, and then I had to figure out what that meant because
Mm.
it's not really, well, now it's more of a thing, but when I first started, it was emerging as something that was more like mentoring language
Mm.
learners. And it was usually people who were really popular in social media, sharing their own language learning process, and people wanted their insight. And
Mm.
so I was like, well, I'm not popular because no one knows who I am. I'm not on social
Mm.
media. Like I don't have a YouTube channel. I don't have an
Yeah.
Instagram. But I was like, I do know what I know.
Yeah.
And I do know that it works
Yeah.
because I recognize patterns, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm always into the whys and the hows, and I document everything. Like I
Yeah.
write it all down, and I'm taking notes because I really want to understand, like, was my Japanese language experience so different from when I was learning Spanish for 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
3 years versus six
Mm-hmm.
years, and I feel like there was more progress.
Right.
Um, and so I was like, okay, let's just do it and start speaking to the things that you believe in about language learning. And it's
Mm.
always been mostly speaking to myself at first, just like perfection. You can be a perfectionist, but learn when to turn it on and turn it off because there's also
Mm.
this view of I'm a recovered perfectionist. And I
Mm.
don't, knock anyone who says that. But for me, I was like, but I'm always going to be that way because it's so ingrained.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, how can I use that to my advantage? That means I have high standards. That means that I
Yeah.
want things to look a certain way. So when can I have high standards? And when do I have to let that go?
Yeah.
And I had to
Yeah.
practice that and learn that. And that helped me to go, like, yeah, like the revision, revision of the work, or when I do a speaking practice activity, record myself, go back to fix it. That's the perfectionism. That's when I'm going in and honing in and
Yeah.
trying to fix those mistakes. But the first time, you just got to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so then language coaching and developing more language around what we already know, because a lot of the stuff we do already know, or we've heard it, but sometimes we don't believe it,
Mm.
or we don't really have the like frame
Mm.
to talk about it. It's like
Mm.
when people give you a word for like being bilingual. If you've never heard the word bilingual before, you're just
Yes.
like, there are some people who speak two languages.
Yes.
And then once someone says, yeah, that's someone who's bilingual, you're like, oh, there's a word for that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not weird.
Yeah.
This is a thing.
Yeah.
And then it gives clarity, it gives comfort, it gives support, and it also gives direction. And so
Right.
I feel like a lot of what I do, which actually I didn't think about until like right now, is like it's giving that clarity and that direction. It's like it's naming literally epiphanies as we're talking.
The power of dialogue.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it's like it's giving that clarity in that direction. It's like
Yeah.
especially for my introvert people. I think I
Mm.
harp a lot on introverts because a lot of people feel like introversion and introverts are people who are shy, who are socially anxious. And the thing that I talk about a lot is that you can be socially anxious and be an extrovert. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can thrive off of being around people and still struggle
Yes.
to be around people.
Yes.
Like you might be in company and say nothing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people who meet me, they're like, I didn't know you were an introvert because I'm very
Mm.
outgoing
Mm.
and I love to talk with people, but I also say I need like 3 to 5 business days afterwards to recover. I need some time to like
Yeah.
retreat into me and to like read
Right.
and to do the things that re-energize me. And then I'll go back out there and, have all the energy in the world for
Yeah.
another 16 hours.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of strategies that are put out there for us to learn languages and learn culture and to use what we're learning that are more leaning towards extroverts and pushing
Mm-hmm.
ourselves to
Mm-hmm.
constantly people and be around people and talk with people. And I feel like there are ways to do it that don't drain your energy so that you can actually do the thing you want to do.
Hmm.
And many of the people that I work with actually don't want to speak some of the languages they're learning. Like they have maybe
Mm.
one or two that they want to communicate with family or to travel. And then they have a couple, they're like, I want to listen to music and understand the music. Like that's my
Yeah.
goal. I just want
Yeah.
to read books
Yeah.
or watch drama. I don't actually want to talk with anyone. It would be great, but
Hmm.
that's not my priority. And the sort of extrovert strategies are tend to focus on speaking more
Right.
than anything else. Lots of
These
thoughts on
are
that.
fantastic points, by the way. I just had like, I think like 10 light bulbs in my head. They are all gone at this moment because I'm not writing notes as as I'm focused on you talking. But I feel like I just want to tell you that there is not only a lot of overlap in the ways that think individually, but also how we're talking about these very complicated topics. Mainly what I see online, and tell me if you see the same, and I think you did mention it just now. There's a fair amount of people talking about the ultimate way, the best way,
Yes.
right? Like the fire proof.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, you can have things be proven, but not necessarily like the only way, right? I don't know when this became the whole like come to Jesus thing of like the language learning world, right?
Yes.
Because like and that reference is totally lost on anyone who doesn't understand, like your Christianity. But honestly, it feels sometimes like they're putting out an altar call and they're literally just like, all right, let's go. Anyone ready to join me on this? And it's like not to say that you're not a person saying this is not qualified, but why are you
Yeah.
acting as though everyone's brains are working the same or like you've cracked the code on human cognition? Because I didn't need my psych and neuroscience background to tell me that we all think differently, we all process differently. Like as I as a human understand that already, right?
Yeah.
And there's something that's giving providing so much contrast, I think, in the work that you're doing, obviously the work I'm doing, but also like many of select other people I see where the amount of pushback we have to give just to even take up space in the industry. I think it's why you're having, I don't know if they're arguments, but you're having fiery, spirited
Yes.
conversation with people on the fact that you can. I mean, just because somebody didn't learn multiple languages at the same time does not mean everybody cannot learn multiple languages at the same time, right? And
Yeah.
you talking about wanting to help others figure out the best way for them, that is something that's actually so new, right? Like like as if people don't know that they're allowed to think individually, uniquely about their own selves. And I feel
Yeah.
that's where we hit something so deep and actually a little bit sad because, you're an adult, right? And you've gone all this time and you've built your life and you didn't realize that you didn't know this about yourself. It's almost like it can be actually a little bit of an emotional experience for some people to see that the way they're thinking about something like their own learning could have been so hidden this entire time, right? And I've definitely experienced like when people have those epiphanies and they're just like, like breaking down over my Zoom call because I'm just
Yeah.
like, it's not like I'm so sorry, but it's almost like I'd rather you realize that and then move into that empowered state where you can do something about it versus stay there forever, right? And
Yeah.
really everything you're sharing on how much you were influenced by different types of instruction. I mean, that's not just like a New York thing or like a US thing.
Yeah.
That's something that we actually go through. Even people who live in countries that have standardized education systems, you have different teachers, you have different
Hmm.
types of exposure, your communities look different. And with technology now, you're able to access different things. And it's almost as though people don't know they're supposed to connect with the things that they've done over the course of their lives and almost instead of like just like looking forward, like I don't know, like I don't speak Japanese, so I need to go like find the best Japanese school, like and the
Yes.
most accredited teacher and all this, or like
Yes.
find a Japanese person, right? Like
Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna go like attack the sushi restaurant down the street because they have like oh they're not Japanese. Oh crap. Okay, so like it's like
Hmm.
this is my whole point around it. Like why people don't do that reflective process first to say, all right, how have I even approached languages to begin
Yeah.
with. And that's something that you did. That's something that you were able to recognize. But I do think it's not the norm to
Yeah.
encourage self-reflection. The norm in this industry right now is to sell, 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 sell.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
you want to see the light, follow me, right?
I appreciate what you said because I think what I've learned is that a lot of times we're not taught how
Mm,
to think or learn. We're
mm,
just taught the information, especially like in
mm,
the US. I can't speak
mm.
for other education systems, but I can, I see what people share about their own experiences
Yeah.
online in other countries. And generally, it's there are some threads that are the same
Yeah.
because even in areas where you are thought to think creatively and to problem solve in new and in innovative ways, there's still this aspect of, okay, but what tools help you to
Mm,
learn? I remember when I was teaching in middle school in person, and me and my co-teacher at the time were looking into learning styles.
mm,
And I had known about it for years, but I was trying to figure out a way to like introduce it to the students so that they could figure out what works best for them.
mm,
And I remember expressing that even though the websites say like your learning style is read write style or kinesthetic,
mm,
that for
mm.
me, I do them as ratios, that we have
Yeah.
all of those learning styles, but
Yes.
depending on the situation, or just even generally speaking, there might be one that's a little bit stronger for you than the others. And my teacher was like, yeah, I agree. Like we were on the same page. We were about to bring it to the students. And there was one teacher on our team that was like, that learning styles has been debunked, right? Like it's not a
Mm,
real thing. And I was like, I have so many thoughts and so many
yeah.
questions, but I
Yeah.
don't know if it's going to be supportive for either of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there's a lot of that, of a lot of like, oh, I've read online that it's been debunked,
Yeah.
therefore I'm never going to use this information, even if it's supportive to you and it's
Yeah.
helpful to,
Yeah.
help you move forward.
Yes, this is my
So,
entire problem with people who are the data loving people.
yes.
I really, really I am not against data at all. Not going to go into my whole background on it, but I am not like, I'm not naive to research or to like quantitative
Yeah.
analysis at all, at all. However, it's almost like the empowerment spectrum. We find it on both sides. We find it on the side of people who I think have no idea that there is a whole body of research literature out there, and that there are studies done on how learning behaviors, because it does fall into like behaviors and cognition
Yeah.
and all that whole, all those different subdisciplines. All right. Fantastic. But then you have the people who are just trying to go with the latest trend. And I don't actually know which is, I think they're all equally like useless. If you decide that you're going to only take whatever was proven in one study, mind you,
Yes.
one study with a sample size of 20 students from this one particular type, without even thinking about education system, the culture that they were in, which
Yes.
language it
Yes.
was, right? All this stuff. And instead of just thinking critically and taking what you need for yourself, because again, self-awareness, right? Like I need to understand myself to know what it is I need. The ping pong effect starts to happen,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah.
And that's why when I think I cheekily use the like the ultimate, the
Yeah.
the greatest.
I
And then
know.
like when people get my resources, it's like, get clarity.
Yeah.
Why are you why are you learning this language in the first
Yeah.
place? Create your
Yeah.
plan.
I
What kind of
know.
plan do you need?
I know.
And I think that's why like I made a video a while ago that was the best resource for learning any language. And then the
Yeah.
video was like, if you're asking yourself what's the best resource, you're asking the wrong question. And
Exactly.
I got comments of people who were like, but you still didn't tell us which app to
The best.
download.
Yeah, I
And I was
know.
like, you missed the point of the
Yes.
video.
Yeah,
And like
absolutely.
again, it's not the fault of because so much of what we do
Hmm.
in this space is like listening to someone who you think has the right answer without realizing that you can collect data about yourself
Hmm.
and figure out what works for you based on that. And I think there's a lot of empowerment in that. So I'm
Yeah.
like, that's one of my things. It's like collect data about you.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best thing, right? Like, why is everyone trying to collect like information
Mm-hmm.
that's coming from some other source. Okay, we're gonna go too far if I go on that whole that whole thing because it's like it's too much of my frustration. But honestly, that whole, I mean, that comment section remark, that doesn't even surprise me because I don't think for one moment anyone stops to think about how many times have I actually downloaded the best, the newest, the most amazing, usually crap, product, tool, resource, right? And I have had to do my own personal work around this as well when deciding how to show up online because I was, I was not, wasn't on social media, wasn't trying to be on
Yeah.
social media, really was
Same.
like totally fine not doing this. Yeah.
Same.
But was so frustrated. I was like, I have to. Like, I see the mess. But honestly, I feel nobody is challenging other people to just take a look. And the first feedback I had, it was early on, and it was basically some people being like, okay, well, then how are you different? Because aren't you doing kind of the same thing of telling people to listen to you? And I'm like, no, but the difference is I'm trying to tell you to listen to yourselves. That's a very different
Yes.
message. Like
Yeah.
I'm not
Yes.
asking, yes, it's coming from my mouth, but it's also coming, look, there are these other people saying it too. Like, look,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely have had those moments too because I'm like, there is no best method. And then at the same time, I'm like, the best method is to listen to yourself. And I'm like,
Yeah.
how can I say those two things at
I
the
know.
same time?
I know.
But I'm like, but it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what we're saying is that there is no like template method, right? That you have to figure
Yeah.
out what your personal template or patterns, and you have to build it in your own way, which is, that's not invalid, right? And that does not invalidate this whole outrageous model of there being cookie cutter, one size fits all, right?
Yeah, because I think a lot of people when they're looking for that, they're expecting, or when we say what the best way is, which is like the clarity and
Yeah.
all those pieces, they're looking for like in the first 3 months of learning
Yeah.
this language, you should start with immersion and use
Yeah.
these podcasts, and then you
Yeah.
should stop your immersion and start with journaling next. And I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe, but
Yeah.
also maybe not.
Yeah, exactly. Like how dare we suggest that people figure out the best way? And I always put it to, I'm like, okay, fine, fine, fine. Like not language, just apparently like this is the mental block coming everywhere. All right, think about like health and fitness. Think about
Yes.
diet. Think about how many times someone has tried to sell you a prepackaged diet method, and you have been like, yeah, okay, like I don't know, like Slim Fast, like Jenny Craig, like
Yes.
we're supposed to what was it, Weight Watchers, like yes, it's gonna work. And it's like how many times have, or even if you didn't try one of these things, you understand the concept of why it didn't work, and it's because it was not built for you, and it wasn't
Yeah, the
built for
paleo
an
diet,
average.
the
Oh my God.
Mediterranean diet, and
Oh my God,
again, there's so
paleo.
many
Yeah.
paths
Yeah. Yeah.
to,
And so if we can understand that base concept for something that is a little more familiar, because I think if we think about like, yeah, fitness too, like, oh yeah, you want to build muscle, lose fat, whatever it is, follow this exercise
yeah,
routine. And you're just
you
like,
should only do yoga, you should only do
yeah, I
Pilates, you
know.
should only do body weight training.
You should go do CrossFit at 5 a.m. in the
Yes.
morning every day. And
Yep.
you're not committed. You're not committed if you don't, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think if you put it like, and I've started to really to use other examples as well. And it's also because online I've gotten in touch with so many other people from other industries. And that's been one of the best things because I think what everyone's running into, and these are all the same types of people, like trying to empower their clients, not trying to like sell them on a new method. And when people say like, all right, so it's like the WeCultivate method. And I'm like, no, it's no, it is not the WeCultivate method. It is the WeCultivate approach, like philosophy. Like it is a,
Yeah.
and then they're just like, isn't that the same thing? And it's like, no, no, it's not at all the same thing because it is not a method. Because if anything, the method is make your own freaking method. Like it's just, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like how much clearer can we get on this? Moving forward though, because like let's just get,
We could talk about this forever.
yeah, forever. Like look, you, me, I'm gonna call like three other people. We're gonna get on a Zoom and we're open up a bottle of wine and we're gonna for the next five
Yes.
hours like
Yep.
talk about this. Yeah. But seriously, I think also, and by the way, I love your handle, your name. I love your branding. I think it's so cool. Because
Thank you.
the word polyglot actually has started to trigger me on a very deep level because of all the nonsense that's out there. And what I loved about when we connected online, right, was that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see you saying the exact same template script I see from everyone else. Like, I speak blah, blah,
Oh,
blah.
that was literally what I didn't want to make. And I
Yeah.
get questions about that. Or
Yeah.
like, do you have videos of you speaking the languages?
Oh
And
my
I have
God.
grappled with that. Like, I
Yeah.
have one video on my YouTube channel of me
Yeah.
speaking in Spanish, and it's still in the format of what I do, of like
Mm.
how to learn Spanish in Spanish. Because I get the desire to want to hear me speak the languages as like proof. But I
Mm-hmm.
also think that there's this, I don't know if it's an obsession or if it's like I don't know what to call it, but this thing about needing to see other people speaking the language in order
Mm-hmm.
to then believe that they can support you. I do recognize that there's an aspect of this that is about inspiration, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially for people who look like me and are like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, you speak multiple languages. And I'm like, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
I do recognize that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's been a difficult path. But
Mm-hmm.
yes, as you said that, I was like, that triggers me too, because I would see those and people would go, okay, this person studied for 8 hours every day, and this was the schedule that they
Yeah.
did, and they shared it online. And grateful that they shared it because people can try that out for themselves, gather data,
Yes.
and decide what works and
Yes.
doesn't work. But they don't do that part. They try the whole thing. And,
Mm-hmm.
the person who shared it was a college student, and they're a full-time,
Yeah.
9 to 5er,
Yeah.
maybe have children and are like, why
Yeah.
is this not working for me? And instead of that data gathering and saying, okay, well, let me take this part out because that's too much and let me shrink down the time, they're like, something's wrong with me. I guess
Mm.
I can't learn languages. And
Yeah.
usually the default is like, I'm too old to learn languages.
It
Like I
bothers me
literally
so
just saw
much.
another person who
Yeah.
said that and I was like,
Yeah.
no.
No, no. And let me tell you, and I posted about this, if you are from an immigrant family, you know damn well that there is no such thing as being too old for shit. You are never too old because you don't have the choice to be
Yeah, I
too
was like, you're
old.
not allowed to.
Yeah, exactly. My grandparents literally teaching, first of all, learning. My grandfather is the one who taught me Microsoft Office because he had just learned it, like after, like arriving in the US and being like, okay, like, so English and computer skills. This is what
Yes.
we need to do in my 70s, right? Like that, he was already in his 70s. My grandmother also, they got their citizenship and they could like converse with
Yeah.
people in English. And that them doing that, and not only that, me being very involved in the local community and
Yeah.
seeing other like elderly people who did that. I once taught a class that was only 80 to 90-year-old like grandfathers, like it was like at a
Yeah.
community center, and zero times will you hear them say, oh, I think I'm too old. It's like, I think if you get, I think people look for excuses, I think it's
Yes.
like the whole like, well, it's easy. It's like when people were like, oh, well, now that I'm 25, I should settle down. Like it's a
Yes.
whole,
Yes.
yeah, like,
We were right the same
yeah,
age.
yeah. My
So,
back hurts because I'm 22 now, and it's like I just want to
yeah.
break it down. Like
I
it's
mean,
not.
I will say, I do jokingly say that, but I
Yeah, but
recognize
it's a
that I'm not being serious.
yes. And when
I'm
people
like,
take it
oh, I'm
so
30 now.
seriously, exactly. No, it's the difference of, I mean, you can of course crack a joke. You can of course be like,
But
like
when you
how
seriously believe it,
I
yeah.
know. And that's the number one thing standing in your way, right? When you believe that there is an upper limit on where you can go, well, you're not going anywhere because you've decided to put the ceiling there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when we talked last, I think it was in our last conversation, I talked about the quote that I share all the time, the whether
Mhm.
you think you can or think you can't,
You're
you're
right.
right.
Mm,
And that's the truth of it is like if you believe that you can't do this, not only will you make excuses about it, right or wrong excuses,
yeah.
valid or not, but then you're also going to reinforce those excuses with your
Yeah.
actions or your inactions, the things that you avoid and the things that you do. But when you
Yeah.
believe in it, you're going to find ways to make it happen, and then you're going to have proof that it is true. But you
Yeah.
can't develop that proof if you don't believe and then, try.
Yeah.
So,
The biggest thing I hear as a direct response to that is always, oh, well, I mean, do you think it's just like positive thinking? So I should just like believe I can.
yes.
No, I mean, I'm not saying go like again, ping pong, right? I'm not saying go to the other side and just be like, oh, it's all in your head. If you believe you can speak Japanese, you can speak
Right? You can
Japanese. Like,
manifest your
yeah,
Japanese
I know.
skills and then never
Yeah,
actually do anything. You're still not
exactly.
doing the
Exactly.
thing
Oh my God.
because you
Yeah.
believe you're going to then go, okay, so I can open up this app if
Mm-hmm.
apps work for you or this textbook
Yeah.
and do the work and I'm going to get it. It may not be
Yeah.
easy the first time, but I'm going to get it because I can learn.
Yeah. Like if
Uh,
I can create this space inside of me to go and welcome in other types of resources and tools and skills and knowledge and whatever, and then just collect that. And I love that you say collect data because I say it the same. I just kind of, it's not just, oh God, data is another word that will get me.
yeah.
I say something like we need to learn the difference between evaluation as judgment and evaluation as a tool for observation because
Yes.
that and I have a whole freaking workshop that if people have
Oh,
to work,
same.
yeah, if they work with me, they go through this first because I'm like I'm not working with you, but we are not going to make a lot of progress if you and I cannot agree that there is a difference and that you need to know what the difference is and please write down for you what the difference is and tell me and like,
Yeah.
prove to me that you understand this concept because
Yeah.
if not, we need to talk more. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that they're like trigger words that we bring up. I'm like, let me bring up a couple more.
Yeah.
Fluency,
Oh Lord.
consistency,
Yeah.
consistency. Because those are
God,
two
15
that
minutes a day, like your abs, and you just
yeah,
go. Yeah.
that's those are two words that I also have to redefine in all
Mm,
of the things that I do. When I say fluency, I'm always like, well, what does fluency mean to you? What does that look like?
yeah.
What does that sound like?
Yeah.
Because I just saw a post the other day in a polyglot group that I'm in, and they said like my goal is to get to B2 in let's say Spanish or French.
Hmm.
They're like, and then is that enough to be a native speaker?
Mm,
And obviously that had lots of different opinions
mm,
in the comments, and some people were like yes, most people who speak the language at a native level are like B1, B2, and then
mm.
some people were like you need C2 or nothing. And I was like, but some native speakers aren't even there
Yeah. Yeah.
in the language.
Yeah.
So it's like, what does fluency mean to you? And then consistency, because so many people, especially a lot of the people that I work with are like fellow ADHD and autistic learners,
Mm,
and consistency feels like it means every day the same thing.
mm,
And so I'm always like, consistency is doing it regularly. And I
yeah.
always compare it to watering a plant. I'm like,
Mm.
lots of plants that we have in our homes, or
Love this. Yes.
that like they need different amounts of water. I was like, I have an
Mm,
orchid that if you put more than a couple sprays on it, it's gonna die. It's gonna
yeah.
be really dramatic and it's gonna die. You know? And you need to
Yeah.
spray it just a little bit and you leave it alone
Yeah.
for a week. And that's its
Yeah.
consistency. And then
Yeah.
some consistency, like I don't remember the name of the plant, but my mom has like it's everywhere in our house, just like leaves. And that needs a lot of water,
Mm,
but you don't have to do it too often. It just needs a lot of water. So
mm-hmm.
again, the amount of water that you give it, the frequency that you come back to give it more, the sunlight, like all these other factors
Yeah.
impact the way the plants thrive. And in that same way for our language studies, you might need different frequencies of studying. So maybe two
Mm,
times, three times, four times a
yeah.
week. You might
Yeah.
need different amounts of what you're doing, like the task that you're doing,
Yeah.
the resource that you're using. Like it all depends. Like what kind of plant are you? Like
Yeah.
maybe I should make that a
Exactly.
quiz. Like what kind of plants, language plant are
Yes.
you?
I love it so much because I actually think, and if you think of a plant, it needs to be sustained because it needs to grow, but it also needs to survive, right? So, like,
Yes.
you need to know based on, I would actually go take it a step further. And it's not just what type of plant are you like point blank, it's also what type of plant are you in this season of your life because you may not
Yes.
need to be an orchid if you are out in the freaking winter, like, like with
Yes.
the polar bears. Like,
Yeah, no,
it's
but I
happening.
talk about that too because
Yeah.
I say like the me that I was in college learning
Mm,
languages, we did
yes.
12 hours of study because after class we were still studying, we were still
Yes.
practicing. I am not that Bronte anymore. When I got to teaching,
Yeah.
immediately I switched everything that I was doing
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
didn't have that kind of time availability or mental
Yeah.
space. And then after teaching, now we're doing mostly remote stuff.
Yeah.
Again, a new version of me that I've had to adjust and shift. So yeah, I love that as well, like in this
Yeah.
season, to remind
Right?
people that it's going to change and that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. The other word that definitely gets me, and I post about it quite a lot, is about native speakers, right? And this idea
Yes.
of there being what I call the fallacy or the myth of a native speaker, because it's not to say that native speakers don't exist. It's just how we are talking about them in the language industry. Literally, as if you ascend, right? You go from nothing. Then you go A1, then you go A2,
Yeah,
then you
yeah,
go B1, then you get to C2, and you're like, but I'm not a native speaker yet. And I think I broke some people's minds the first time we met. And as I continue to do when I do, consult with new people.
yeah.
And I'm like, and they're like, I want to be a native speaker. And I'm like, that's interesting. Okay, so tell me what you mean by that, right? And I just did a post on
Yes,
this.
I
Tell
did.
me
I saw
like,
that post.
yeah, yeah. And that was literally like, it took like 2 seconds to make, right? Because I'm like, this is my everyday life. And
Yeah,
it's a question that shocks a lot of people because they're like, well, you're like, I'm sorry, you're a native speaker, right? So you know what I mean. And I'm like, no, I want you to tell me what you are thinking, what you're imagining. Because, and I will explain after that not everybody has the same answer. Some people have told me native speaker to them means that they just want to like speak really like easily, right? So it's like they don't have the pressured type of output that they, or
yeah,
the self-confidence, like being very, very, very low all the time kind of feeling. Other people literally want to be me. Like they want to, I'm sorry to say
yes,
it like that, but they literally, when they describe to me that they want all of the ways that I would say things, I'm like, well, then you don't want to be a native speaker. You want to be Michelle, which is not the same thing because native speaker or not, I will still describe things in my way. And my way, it's not about the language. It's how I'm choosing to express, right? And
yeah.
a lot of people don't get that. And I mean, going to your previous point on how powerful finding the right words and the right phrasings can be.
I remembered a thought that I said earlier that I said I would come
Yeah,
back to,
yeah,
and I was like, "Oh,
fantastic. Yeah,
I was like,
yeah,
perfect segue."
yeah.
Is that the differences between a language and a dialect
Mm,
for many people
yeah,
is a gray area.
yes.
And so, like, I have friends who speak English and then speak like Jamaican or Trinidadian patois.
Mm,
And
mm,
that is a language. I don't care
yeah.
what anybody else says. The reason why
Mm,
it's a language is that if I am not exposed to it for a long period of time, I don't understand it. And that's not my
yeah.
culture, but I grew up around it. And there are times where I'm like, I don't understand anything anymore. I am so
Mm-hmm.
sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And then the language has to shift,
Yeah,
or not has to, but the people that I'm speaking to shift their language so that I can
yeah,
actually,
yeah,
participate in the conversation. And in that same
yeah.
way, I brought up how, like, technically, I grew up in a, English speaking household, but we speak, what is it called? AAVE,
Mm,
Ebonics, American
mm,
English.
mm, mm,
And the more that I interact with people across so many different areas, especially online, because we
mm,
have this as a tool, the more I learn that some of the ways that I communicate are not standard, that are its own language. It's not just like
mm.
a dialect of saying something in a different way. It's like we actually have a different way of thinking of this, and there's
Yeah,
a cultural aspect. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. And so for me and for many people, it's a very gray area. Actually, I wrote some things down because I was like, I want to remember
yeah.
some of the things that are said. So like, and there's this one expert. I'm gonna try to make sure to share his Instagram with you, in case
Mm,
people want to read more, or like, because he's amazing at what he
mm,
shares. He brings up a lot of, gives names to a lot of the things that I know
mm.
but didn't think about until he, labels it, and then
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
oh, that's a thing.
yeah.
So he talks about like discourse markers when we're
Mm,
talking,
mm.
and how a lot of people in my community will say things like, girl, listen. Wait, so like, or like, see, look,
Yeah,
you know, or the one that I know was prevalent on the internet for various reasons is like child, and
yeah,
it's not child, it's spelled
yeah.
more like Chile.
Yes. With the running L. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And these are just like ways that we start off what we're about to say,
Mm,
but doesn't necessarily have a meaning. So when we're like, listen, we're
mm.
not actually asking you to listen. It's
Yeah.
just like us getting ready to say the thing that we're
Yes.
about to say.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that that was like not a standard concept until I start
Mm,
to get exposed to different, ways of speaking, especially English, because English is spoken in so many places that every area has their own version of it.
yeah.
And then talking about how, like, me and my friends and my family and people in my community, we make up our own words all the time.
Mm,
Um, One of the things that we do is adding like ility, or like anything
mm.
that adds like an adverb, so comfortability is one that is used
Yeah.
quite often. We'll say things like, like he's so scary. Not that
Mm.
he is actually scary, but he is scared.
Yeah, I see. Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, so
yeah,
like my
yeah.
my cat's acting real scary, and
Yeah.
he's
But it's
running
also
around
with the
scared.
real, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
just certain things like that. And combining all of that with the grammar made me understand or come to a slow realization of like it's not just like insert a word here and now you can understand, but there's a
Mhm.
whole construction
Yeah.
that is vastly different. And actually, the first time it was pointed out to me was when I invited some college friends to my house,
Mm.
and I apparently when I switched from talking to them to talking with my mom, they were like, "You spoke a little different." Like very
Yeah.
close friends, we talked about language and culture and all of these things already, so I was very close with them. But they were like, "I never heard you talk like that before." Like usually,
Mm.
they were like, "That's different." So I started to pay more attention.
Yeah.
Like it did make me self-conscious, thankfully, because
Yeah.
it definitely could have, even
Yeah.
well-intentioned. But it
Yeah.
was just pointing out that like I didn't realize that I naturally just switched into something else.
Yes.
And so I think one of the things that I love about what I do and what we do,
Mm.
especially what we share on social media, is pointing out the things we already do in the languages that we speak
Mm.
to help you understand the languages that you're learning. Like
Yeah.
we already, when we forget a word, we don't necessarily say, okay, conversation's over. I'm
Yeah.
not talking anymore. We go, okay, what was
Shut
that
down.
word?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't shut down. We're like, okay, the thing, like it's
Mm.
metal and it has holes in it, and we're starting to describe it.
Yeah.
And maybe
Yeah.
the other person has,
Circumlocute. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And so that's a skill that we have that we don't recognize until someone points it out. And that's something that when we're learning another language, we struggle to do because we feel like we need to know all the words for all the things. When in
Yeah.
reality, even in our native language, we're describing things all the time. We're forgetting words all the time and just
Yeah.
going, or like there's standard words for like thingy,
Mm.
or whatchamacallit in almost every language because
Yeah.
I just learned the one for Spanish because I heard it and or like, the person whose name you don't know. Uh,
Yeah.
and I was like, so like we all have that word for when you don't know the word
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
describe it. So
Yeah.
give yourself permission to do that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I appreciate you bringing this up, by the way, because I feel like the self-awareness part doesn't come just because you became like you had some, I mean, I'm sure you're very like not to take away from your inner
no,
light, you know what I
absolutely.
mean?
Yeah.
But it's also that you highlight this one moment where your friends are like, whoa, hey, like I just noticed something. And I would say that's probably also a pretty common experience, right? Like friends being like, hey, I noticed this about you. Whoa, like that's different, right? I feel that people who can take those comments and kind of find the place for self-examination using that as a channel are generally the people who then start to go deeper and deeper and deeper, right? And
Yeah.
it's really people who are able to do that early on in life. I do think it sets you up better for all of your learning experiences going forward because you're like, I've already learned to see the nuances inside of my own language, inside of the way that I shift and adapt in my own society. So these aren't new concepts when they're presented to me in a new language. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And I think it even though many of us learn that early, it doesn't mean there's no age limit to
Oh my
starting,
God.
right?
Yeah.
Like you can
Yeah.
start at any point, but I will say that even outside of language learning, it was something that I was raised on a very early age because my
Mm,
mom used to talk a lot about like bullying and how to
mm,
handle bullies. She
mm,
was like, You're gonna get bullied. I'm just telling you now." She's
mm,
like, "Because they're gonna talk about
mm,
your glasses. Like glasses were not cool then,
mm,
and she's
yeah.
like, You're very smart and you get good grades. They're gonna talk
Mm,
about that. They're gonna call you a nerd and but
mm,
here's how you handle it
mm,
and you don't let them get to you."
yeah.
And that's when I learned the power of like laughing at what people
Mm,
say or like asking for like clarity. I remember being called a geek.
mm.
And I was like, actually, I'm not a geek, I'm a nerd. So please, if you're gonna, I was like, you gotta call it correct. I was like, I'm not a geek because I'm not that into technology, but I am
Yeah.
smart, so I'm a nerd. I was like, and please don't call me a dork because my glasses actually look good. Like,
Yeah. Oh,
and that would
yeah.
cause this confusion in the
Mm,
person that's trying to, and I think that process of thinking through how people interact and why people do the things that they do, why do people bully and why do people say
mm,
these things, got me into the language, like it was a natural thing for me to also think about languages and
Mm,
why do we learn certain ways, and that's also why I think I naturally drifted into teaching because
yeah.
I had been learning and then sharing what I learned with people for years, and
Yeah.
so it's like here I am.
This is I don't know if you ever feel this, but I feel sometimes like the kid versions of us would probably be really proud of the
Yes.
way that we turned out because for sure, baby Michelle was bullied a lot and
Yeah.
she has found her healing because of the way that, you know, adult empowered Michelle is able to show up also not just for myself but for other people. And that's exactly what I see you doing, right? I mean, be it
Yeah.
your teaching work is that's not language related at all, right? That's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's just general
Mm,
education, some sped work,
mm,
elementary, middle school, all
mm,
subjects.
mm-hmm. Do you, just to jump over into like out of the language world for a moment, do you feel like there are things that you see as being kind of in common between what you do inside of your language coaching stuff, like all the topics we're already talking about, like learner disengagement and like
Yeah.
disempowerment? Do you also see that inside of your normal classroom?
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
that's like my ground for practicing,
Yeah.
you know. Or reverse is like I practice with my adult clients and then I bring it to
Yeah.
the students. So I
Mm.
talk about motivation and I talk about,
Hmm.
making mistakes with my young kids and,
Yeah.
then I bring it to the adults and I say I work with both age groups. It's not an
Yeah.
age thing.
No. Yeah.
I have clients in their 60s, 70s, 80s. I
Yeah.
have students that I've worked with as young as 9 years old. I've worked across all ages. It's not an
Yeah.
age thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely about the process. And well, like one thing, for example, that I use with my clients that I have learned through my like general teaching is about how to improve reading, right? There's a lot of
Mm.
strategies that we have as teachers for like improving reading skills, improving pronunciation for the younger kids as well. And there's this one resource that's written in like a variety of ways, but the general idea is like questions that you ask yourself before reading a text, questions that you ask yourself while reading a text, and
Mm.
questions that you ask after. And it's like a very well-known strategy. There's like variety of questions. Sometimes it's what the teachers will ask the students to get them started. Sometimes it's what you give to students so they can ask themselves. And
Mm.
then I immediately was like, well, why don't language learning people talk about this? I've never heard a
Mm.
language teacher
Mm.
talk about this. And I was like, there's
Yeah.
this to me, again, because I'm in both areas, there's this natural overlap between
Mm.
the two. But
Mm.
if you're not in both spaces, you don't know the information that you don't know. And
Yeah.
so I remember bringing that up to one of my clients was like, oh yeah, there's these questions, like comprehension questions to see if you understand,
Yeah.
right? Versus just write a summary,
Mm-hmm.
journal about what you wrote. Like
Mm-hmm.
even for
Mm-hmm.
my my students, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
the book was good, and
There was a dog. The dog was
yeah,
small. Yeah.
your
Yeah.
point. Yeah, tons of overlap, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking about it and using it all the time.
We're running out of time, but thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah.
Where can people find you, by the way? I know you're kind of everywhere, but where are you mostly these days?
Yeah, so Instagram, Threads, and YouTube. I'm getting my YouTube like consistency going, so definitely there. But Instagram is like my main place. But basically, like you said, everywhere. Anywhere the Polyglot Fox, you will probably find me there.
Yes.